ago that you know of, or?
Not that I'll go over what I did, the history
Okay.
of it, but I don't think that any changed in 4 years since I worked there.
Okay. Well, anytime you want to start, it's your floor.
Okay, I need to have someone, I don't know, can I just hit share screen and get going? Or can I do that?
Oh, you're not the
Yeah,
host.
go ahead.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So,
Yeah.
so Terry, do you have to
How do I enable you?
um,
Hmm.
maybe click under my name and then say share screen or something? I don't know. I hope so.
Oh, wait a minute, there are some buttons here. There's no share screen. Yeah, you're right. How about if I make you the host? And then you can share your screen.
Okay. How do I get back? How do I turn you back?
Click on Village of Fairhaven and the 3 little dots in the right-hand corner. And then you can give it back to me.
Okay, sounds good.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Yep, it's on.
Yeah, I just gotta. Yeah, there we go.
Looks good.
Okay. Well, if everyone can hear me and see me, okay, I'll get going. So I'm Steve Winkley. I'm with New York Rural Water Association. The village is a member. I think the village has utilized our services over the years quite a bit on the water side. I work with doing drinking water protection. And I think at your last village board meeting, did you approve a motion to work with us? Is that right? I hope that. Okay, good. So we'll get to the history and everything, but I've got a little presentation here I'm going to give. Was someone talking there? I'm sorry. Okay.
Maybe it's another room.
Okay. So tonight's agenda, I don't know any of you, so I don't know how this works on Zoom, but doing introductions. I want to talk about what's a drinking water source protection plan. I've been doing this for 26 years. It's gone through different names. This is what the state is now calling it because they have their own program doing this. So I'll talk about what a drinking water source protection plan is. Talk a bit about the details of the village's water supply without giving out. Well, I think everyone knows where it is, but talk in length about previous efforts I worked with the town of Sterling on, and then talk about future efforts, kind of a free dialogue about that, if that's okay. So I don't know how to do the introductions. I guess maybe people can just chime in. Again, I'm Steve Winkley with New York Rural Water. We're a nonprofit organization, and I'm funded, actually federally funded through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So, Walt, you introduced yourself. Anybody else with the village there at this point?
Judy Dunaway was a trustee. Terry was the supervisor of the water department, and Terry Gordy was our village treasurer clerk.
I'm sorry, before Terry, who was it?
Was Roger.
Roger, yes, Roger. Yep. Okay, good. Good to. Okay. Susan, I think we've spoken, right?
Yes, I talked to you several weeks ago and
Right.
you said this is how we can best communicate. So
Right. Okay.
we're very happy to have you here.
Sure. Okay, so we'll go around the Zoom meeting here. Someone chime in next.
My name is Carrie Bolton. I've seen you at Rural Water, Steve.
Oh, hi, Carrie.
I'm with
Yes,
the Village of Fairhaven.
yes, Carrie. Nice to hear you. See ya.
This is Scott Crawford. I'm the supervisor for the town of Sterling.
Hi, Scott.
I'm Karen.
Steve J. Sawyer, Town of Sterling Board Member. Thank you for putting this on tonight.
I'm Karen Hawes. I'm a resident of the Village of Fairhaven and also with a citizens group to protect our clean drinking water here in the town of Sterling, called Sterling Water Street.
Anybody else on the call? Okay. Very good.
So annoying.
So we'll get going. Yeah, maybe if someone wants to, maybe everyone mute themselves right now, because I keep hearing somebody's in the background. So, and then just, if you want to talk, just unmute yourself. I think you can do that, right? I just keep hearing something in the background there. Okay, that's better. So, thank you. So the Drinking Water Source Protection Plan, basically this is the goals and objectives of it. Obviously, it's to protect public health by preventing pollutants from entering drinking water supply. It's to protect the environment by ensuring a sustainable supply of water for the future. It's to avoid potential costs involved with water treatment or water supply replacement. It's to increase community confidence in their local public drinking water. It's to create partnerships, and we have citizens group, we have 2 municipalities, we have a nonprofit, so those are all potential partnerships. And then also there are a number of funding sources out there to aid in implementing some potential protection measures. And these are primarily state and federal funding sources, which are available if once a protection plan is finalized and starting to be implemented. So the steps of a drinking water, and this is not a long presentation, so there'll be plenty of time for, and if anybody does have a question, just you can feel free to interrupt me, just unmute yourself. The steps of a drinking water source protection plan form a stakeholder group, which obviously we have the start of tonight. It's just to ensure that there's a group on the ground in Fairhaven and Sterling that this plan represents. It's not just New York Rural Water Association doing a plan in a vacuum. So there's a stakeholder group. We used to call this the planning team, but it's now called a stakeholder group. It's the second step really in this process is to establish the area or areas that you want to protect. And we can talk about the prior efforts in Sterling, the approach that we took there. We may wish to take a different approach here. Not necessarily in particular order, but once you have the area identified that you want to protect, you then look at that area for potential sources of contamination and concerns. So both potential sources of pollution, but also in this case, I know there's potential water extraction concerns. So I've broadened that to include concerns. Fourth is to identify protection and management methods, how you go about protecting and managing this resource that you folks share. And finally, start implementing, well, you come up with a timeline to these methods, protection and management methods, on how to implement these various methods. And then you start carrying out the protection and management method. So there really could be, you could break this into 6 steps. I seem to like 5 steps, but in a nutshell, that's where we're at. So we're at number 1 here. We've got our stakeholder group. The village has committed to working with us. Again, we're federally funded to provide assistance to water systems on doing drinking water source protection plans. So a little bit about the Village of Fairhaven's water supply. Basically, I've talked to Roger and Carrie before, 4 or 5 years ago, and collected the information that was accessible in both the files at the water plan and in the village office. I've also talked to DEC's water supply permit program. I've got information from Cayuga County Health Department, and basically, and also a 1990 report, which I'll show in a second. And I've kind of compiled it into a table here, which is the 2 wells, because in New York State, you must have 2 wells, you must have a redundant supply. 2 wells in New York State, although the health department, Cayuga County and New York State Department of Health, regulate the day-to-day operations of the water system. The actual withdrawal of water is regulated by the DEC. So whenever you're applying for a new source or an increase in the taking of water, you have to get what's called a water withdrawal permit. And the DEC regulates any withdrawals of water. They used to regulate any municipal withdrawals of water, but now it's any place that has the capacity to withdraw 100 gallons per minute or more. So, and that's anything, not a total withdrawal, but pump capacities. So to summarize the data here, we got well 1 completed in 1967 to a depth of 46 feet, although some people say that's 50 feet, got them reversed, but I'm going with 46 feet, unless Roger and Carrie tell me I'm wrong. The pump capacities are the actual pumps that are in the wells. And that's the capacity in gallons per minute, that's GPM. The estimated safe yield, this is a question that Susan, I believe, asked me, and I got this confirmed by the DEC today. Those are actual estimated safe yields. There's very little, that's my 3rd point here. There's very little to no documentation on how those were determined, but the state says your estimated safe yield for well 1 is 500 gallons per minute. And for well 2, it's 250 gallons per minute. Well 2 is similar in depth. It was completed in 1986. Actually, I have the well log, the completion report for that, done by A.W. Kincaid out of Canastota. It has slightly smaller pump capacity, and it has a smaller safe yield. And the last column is what you don't really need to know that, but that's every withdrawal has a water supply permit number, and that's what that is. The aquifer is a sand and gravel aquifer. It's confined by at least one discrete layer of clay. There's probably smaller, thinner layers of clay in there. So we call that a confined aquifer, which is good in the sense that things at the land surface aren't going to directly impact the wells as quickly as if it were an unconfined aquifer. However, it's a fairly thin, fairly shallow aquifer. And based on your last 2 years that I have of DEC, Roger and Carrie submit an annual water withdrawal report, goes to DEC based on the 1999 and 1999, I'm talking about 2019 and 2020, I believe it is. Average that out per day. It's an average of taking withdrawal right now, the village of only, and I say only, it's still significant, of 120 to 125 gallons per minute. So if that's the case, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roger and Carrie,
Happened to me before.
that is significantly less than the pump capacities in the estimated safe yield. Now, there are days when there's much higher use, and we have those statistics as well. The high yield, what's the right word for it? The highest yield days, which might be even double that number, but the average number is that. So, so that's a little bit about the wells. If anybody has a question for me about the wells, now's the time to ask me before we move on. Unmute yourself and ask me, that's fine. If not, I'll keep going. So in 1990, it was called firm out of Casanova near Syracuse, east of Syracuse, was called Stearns and Wheeler. It's now was purchased by a company, I believe they're still GHD. Stearns and Wheeler was an engineering firm doing a lot of work in water and wastewater. And I believe the village got a grant, I could be wrong, from the EPA, I'm not sure, but they hired Stearns and Wheeler to do a study. And I have a copy of that, and I believe the village has a copy of this still, but it was done in 1990, back when we called everything wellhead protection. But it defined, it delineated what we called back then a wellhead protection area. It identified land uses and potential sources of contamination to the supply. And at the time, it proposed what we call state watershed rules and regulations. A little bit quickly about that. That's state public health law. And what that does is that is a mechanism to protect water supplies that are outside a municipality's jurisdiction. The only problem with that is in 1990 and really until today is that they're not enacting, they being the New York State Department of Health, are not enacting state watershed rules and regulations. I know Cayuga County is working to try to get them for, what is the lake that supplies Auburn? Was it Owasco? No, not Owasco. Is it Owasco? I think they're trying to get watershed rules and regulations for Owasco because of the problems that some of the Finger Lakes are having with harmful algal blooms. But make a long story short, the only two watershed rules and regulations that the state has either enacted or revised in my tenure, and I've been here 26 years, is the New York City and the city of Syracuse for Skinny Atlas Lake. And because those are unfiltered water supplies, surface water supplies. So make a long story short, that's what they proposed in 1990, but it didn't go anywhere because it wasn't a mechanism, and honestly still is not a mechanism that the state health department is pursuing. Now I've been told that there is some possibility they may do that, but don't hold your breath. It takes 5 to 10 years for that process under best of circumstances to happen. So in this 1990 report, here's a map. Hopefully you can see this map. It shows the village well field here. That's the building. And the shaded diagonal line, this area here, shaded, is what they called the wellhead protection area. They called it zone of surveillance. They called it a lot of different things. But they based that area on hydrogeologic boundaries, topographic boundaries, and believe it or not, Route 104A.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and the reason for that is my next line is they really did not have good data. They quoted, in order to determine objectively the actual area of influence of the well field, it is necessary to perform extended aquifer tests of each of the village wells at their maximum pumping rates. Well, that has not been done since 1990. I know the wells have been developed. The people that do the well development will pump the well and check the drawdown in the well for a few hours at a time. But when they say extended, they're talking 2 or 3 day pumping tests where they're monitoring the drawdown, not only in the 2 wells, Roger and Carrie, I don't know if that Doug well is still there or whether that's been decommissioned. There was a Doug well, a shallow caisson well, 18-foot deep. You would monitor the drawdown in that well, but all the adjacent wells in the area that tap the aquifer. And just as I show my cursor line here, these areas that are marked T, they're T for till. It's glacial till, that is not the aquifer. It's kind of in between where I'm drawing my line here. What this is an old channel. It's an old, could have been an old river channel, but in glacial times it became we call it a channel for meltwater from the glacial ice. And it deposited material that up here is exposed along Simmons Road. But down in the well field, there's a layer of clay and sand, finer sand over the coarser gravel that these 2 wells that the village uses tap into. And so they didn't have much information back in 1990. And to be quite honest with you, there's not much, if any, information more except the work I did in Sterling. But in terms of pumping tests, new information around the well field, keep in mind the wells were drilled the well 2 was drilled in 1986. There was a pump test done in 1986. The records for that are pretty sketchy, to be quite honest with you. It wasn't until probably 2000, maybe 10, 12 years ago that the DEC outlined, here's how we want you to do a pumping test. Here's how you must do it. You being the water supplier, i.e. their consultant, this is how you need to do it. So in 1986, it was pretty much seat of the pants, still way of doing things. And so there is not information. And so to try to get it, why 500 gallons per minute and 250 gallons per minute, I can see easier why it's 250 gallons per minute is a safe yield for well 2, because I do see some of the pumping test data for that in 1968 or whenever that well 1 was put in. I think what happened was in 1986, they pumped both well 1 and 2 at the same time. They pumped well 1 at 360 gallons per minute and saw that it could pump more. So they theorized that it could pump up to 500. And believe it or not, that's what they said. Okay, 500. That would not work today, just so you know. So in a nutshell, that's what the 1990 report, it outlined this protection area. It did a good job of using the available information. It identified land uses, and some of those land uses are still there. And it looked at potential threats. The reason it used 104A as the line is because the direction of flow of groundwater is, and watch my arrow as I go, is in this direction. It's in this direction. So it's to the west. And so if you look at this, you're basically pumping, the source of the water is moving from the southeast, and so very little water is theorized to come from the across the road. Without pumping wells surveyed, monitoring wells surveyed, elevations, tests, pumping tests, that's only theory at this point. But that's the best available information, unfortunately, that we have right now. So, so jumping ahead 15 years, in 2015, in response to this very concerns why we're having this talk tonight, proposed bottling plant across the village well field at a former bait farm. I began working with a group of individuals in Sterling, not the same group, but different individuals on a source water protection plan. I worked with the town of Sterling. We actually invited the village. For whatever it's worth, we didn't get active participation from the village board, although I know the clerk cooperated with me and Roger and Carrie cooperated with me. I think they were aware of what we were doing. But the group I principally worked with was, and town supervisor and town councilman can correct me if I'm wrong, if you still have this group or not, but I think it was the zoning commission. And that group had just updated the zoning, and it wasn't the planning board and it wasn't the
Right.
zoning board of appeals. It was a different group.
Right.
And it was led also by the, she's still there, the town assessor. And we worked for a while on this, and representatives were, again, from the village were asked to participate as well. So I started in collecting and reviewing available information, and I'll have to admit somebody, I'm so sorry. Because I'm now the leader of this group. I'm sorry, so sorry.
Steve, this is Mayor Basile. If you could also mute people, because we're hearing background noise.
Yeah, okay, how do I mute this?
I don't know, but they're having side conversations. Yeah, if we could ask people that are listening online to mute, because we can hear you talking to other people.
If you click on their microphone and a little line goes across it, then you've muted it.
I don't know how to unmute. I don't know how to mute everybody, but
All right.
everyone can mute themselves, right? With the little microphone thing, right? So, so anyway, in a few months later, in July, and the town of Sterling passed a 9-month moratorium on approving any water extraction facilities for the purpose of, so that we could work on doing something, and ideally addressing it through the town of Sterling's land use regulations. And so from that point forward, I worked on doing that. I'm going to jump ahead. I want to show you. Ignore what it says above here. But for example, I spent many months working across all of Sterling, driving every road in town, foiling the DEC for every well that was drilled that they had a copy of. And since 2000, every well that's been drilled in the state of New York, the DEC has a copy of the well log for that. Also, any records from the US Geological Survey, any records from the New York State Department of Transportation. And also the town of Sterling had done a number of surveys because they now have, I believe, 3 water districts. At the time they had 2 and working on a 3rd. But they had surveyed their residents to see if they were interested in the condition of their wells, whether they had good wells or bad wells, the depth of their wells. So that was confidential information that I was able to review at the town offices. I never shared that information because it was confidential, but I was able to plot those on a map based on the parcel ID numbers. So when we're all said and done, I had a really good database of wells all across the town of Sterling, and I was able to map all the aquifers. In red there or pink are areas where there's exposed sand and gravel. So the area of the village's wells that's down here, there is exposed sand and gravel at the surface. And also in gray are areas where there's not sand and gravel at the surface, but based on the well information, I theorized that there's a confined aquifer. So in this case, where the village's water supply is, there's actually 2 aquifers. There's an exposed sand and gravel aquifer, and then down deep where the village is tapping, there's a confined aquifer. So I mapped all the aquifers and all that information. That's what we did. That's what I did in Sterling for the better part of 6 months during this moratorium period. And I came to the conclusion in March, after looking at all the data that I had and the Stearns and Wheeler report and what was available on the village's wells, that I did not have, and honestly, the direction of flow, as I explained, that I felt it was a better approach to not identify what we call a wellhead protection overlay in the zoning. That's where you draw an area in the zoning and say, we're going to protect this area differently. The way I decided to do that was on a townwide basis to look at all the aquifers, sand and gravel aquifers, put them in an overlay district, rather than that very small and honestly ill-defined area around the well of the village wells. Because again, there had not been pumping tests done to really know what that area was. And the town, because it does have zoning and does have site plan review is where if you have a proposed a project of particularly of a commercial or industrial nature, and you could require that particular project to be developed a certain way or require certain information before giving approval. And so it's a discretionary decision of the town whether to grant that site plan approval or not, based on information that's presented to, in this case, it would be the planning board, possibly the town board, or the zoning board of appeals. So what we decided in March, so 2 months before this moratorium, I think, was going to expire, was that, and we had to write the law, was that we decided to use site plan approval standards and an aquifer overlay district rather than a defined wellhead protection overlay. Because although there was a proposal directly across the street, I believe there is now perhaps the same developer has also bought another parcel that probably may not have been in that wellhead zone if we had gone with that. So we wanted to look at the whole town, not just that rather small and honestly ill-defined area around the well. So we looked at the town and looked at it on a town-wide basis. So, in May, we amended, the town of Sterling amended its land use regulations. We came up, the title of the law was a groundwater protection law. And it basically did three things. It required water extraction facilities to obtain a special use permit. A special use permit is required for a variety of different uses in the town. So we added this as and defined exactly what a water extraction facility is. I think we have a good definition there. And so any water extraction facility would have to have a special use permit in the town of Sterling. It specified the criteria for the permit, what's required for such a facility to submit, and it quite a bit of information, quite a bit of detailed hydrogeologic groundwater information. They'd have to do a lot of pump tests. They'd have to monitor the village's wells, any water, public water supply wells, private wells. They'd have to survey, look at wells within a certain radius of a particular extraction facility. And then they'd have to basically show evidence that there was no adverse impact on these wells, either private or public. And the town, that's one of the criteria the town would use to grant that special use permit. There was other standards like impacts on wetlands, streams. I know there's a wetland right near the well field, for example. So you couldn't have an impact on that. So we also, in this law, we also did an aquifer overlay district. The town has some other overlay districts. We identified it based on the map I just showed you. And we also tweaked the language in the town's subdivision regulations a little bit. Not any huge changes, to be honest with you, but they were amended slightly to try to preserve groundwater recharge. And again, subdivision regs are just, I don't know if there are many subdivisions in Sterling right now, but going in, but that's usually it's 5 or more subdivision of a property and then 5 or more lots. And so we did put some encouragements on there to preserve groundwater recharge. And again, here's the map. This is the overlay district. I mean, we wanted to be, when we was the zoning commission and myself, wanted to be consistent with the tenor of the zoning and the rest of the town. So the overlay district is not, I mean, I've written 20-page zoning laws of overlay districts. If you look at the other overlay districts in the town of Sterling, they're not 20 pages long. So we kind of wanted to be consistent with the nature of the overlay districts in the other parts of the town. So we just made sure that commercial industrial uses looked at groundwater protection, and that groundwater protection, including impacts on private and public wells, were considered for any areas in the town that are in one of these aquifer areas. So whether it was this particular development or another potential area, who's to know where, the next water extraction or large water user or, potential user that could impact groundwater could be. So that's what we did in 2016. Unfortunately, in July of 2016, and I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on this, but there was a citizen in Sterling that threatened us. And for our legal counsel basically said we should withdraw our technical assistance to the town of Sterling. And to this day, after 26 years, it's the only town I've ever had to do that. So we did not finish a drinking water source protection plan. We never completed it in Sterling. We got the law done, but there are other steps that we wanted to do. and, some more education, awareness, mapping, things like that. And we can certainly incorporate that in what we're doing now. But I wanted to let you know why there isn't a protection plan is because we were, and I'm not going to go into depth, I'm not going to mention who it was, but we were forced to withdraw our support and our assistance. That's the first time and every time we've had to do that. And then we've had to, because of this, change how we, our lines of communication are. We're a membership organization of communities and water and wastewater systems. And so Roger, Carrie, mayor, deputy mayor, clerk, village board members, town board members, supervisors, that's who we work for. That's who I can directly communicate with. This is a policy that my boss, our CEO, has instituted. And it is too bad because up until this point, we were all, and we still are, all about public outreach. That's what we're doing tonight. But I would never think twice about fielding questions and emails from people. And I never thought it would be used against me. But to not go any further, that's why we've had to change our policies. So Susan, I apologize why we can't directly communicate except during meetings like tonight, but that's why, unfortunately. So that said, I'm really happy that the Village of Fairhaven has agreed to pick up where we kind of left off. Now it's going on 4.5 years ago. And ironically, just before that all happened, just after that happened, I had heart valve surgery and was laid up for 9 months. So not much would have happened after that anyway, but it laid kind of put things in perspective as well. So where do we go from here? We're going forward. I know that there's, and I will unmute everybody, or everybody can unmute themselves when I'm done with this last slide, is discuss future efforts. But honestly, I know time may be of the essence, but obviously I want to update the work we did 4.5 years ago with present land use and concerns. Unfortunately, nothing is new in terms of pumping test data, things like that, unless the village would like to do that. And I'm be more than happy to assist with that. I think Sterling Water Stewards have hired a consultant, which I know it's my former advisor at Syracuse University, Don Siegel, is one of the people they've hired. So I know them very well. So maybe something can be done there to get more information. What we can perhaps revisit what we did 4.5 years ago and what we could do also, but also there's some non-regulatory things that we could talk about. Again, the situation is the village's water supply is in the town of Sterling. This is probably more often the case with villages than not, to be quite honest, because villages are small. When wells were drilled, they looked at where's the water. More often than not, they wanted to keep away from septic systems and sewer systems. They drilled outside of the village. So no one thought much of it, but that's a lot of that is these issues of development are now coming forward. So that said, I don't know if everyone can unmute themselves. I don't think I muted anybody. Hit the little button on your microphone if you want, or maybe I can do that, or I don't know, but you can, I don't know. Here, let me turn this back over to,
Village of Fairhaven.
how do I do that?
There's,
Get off
there's,
blue screen.
so there's 3 little dots. First you have to,
Okay, more, and I'm gonna say,
yeah,
I'm going to say, let's see,
maybe I can take it back.
meeting info.
Right click on the 3 dots.
So do you have 3 dots? First, if you don't,
I have the 3 dots.
okay,
What I don't see is where I can turn it back over to you. How do I make the village the presenter here?
I figured-
Steve?
Yeah.
Jay,
Steve, this is Jay Sawyer. If you go to your top right of your screen, you'll see view. If you right click onto it, I believe you can take care of it there.
View. How do I do that?
Yeah,
I'm not used to Zoom. I don't use Zoom much. I use WebEx or GoToMeeting. So,
yeah, that isn't the correct button. So
okay.
Terry was telling you the blue dots next to their screen.
Oh, I think I see it now.
Yeah, they're real faint. Down there, lower left.
Oh. Do I have to open everybody maybe?
I really don't know how to take it back. I think you have to turn it back over to me.
I apologize, folks.
Well, we can hear you. That's
Well,
good.
that's important. Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Here we go. Make host. Here we go.
All right.
Okay, Village of Fairhaven's now host. Okay.
There we go. Finally, it kicked over. Okay.
Okay. So there's my spiel. Questions?
So this is Mayor Basile.
Yes,
A couple of questions.
sure.
I'll start with, you mentioned that you had some things that you didn't finish. What does it take to complete that process, and is there a cost associated with it? That's question
No
one.
cost. Absolutely no cost.
Okay, and 2, is Fairhaven the right fit for being a lead agency on this? Since our wellheads are in the town of Sterling. And my third question is do we have to have a mirror image of what Sterling has for their zoning / plan permit review?
I think so.
Because the map you showed covered Fairhaven as part of the Sterling plan. I guess I want to make sure there's not a loophole in there
Sure.
for the village portion of it. And we can send you our section.
Okay.
So we can get Sterling section so we can make sure they match and mirror one another.
So the Village of Fairhaven is the right entity to, it's your water supply. So it is your drinking water plan. So it is, it was unique that before it was the town of Sterling, and the reason I had to open it up basically to a townwide approach is because I was working with the town of Sterling. So now we're protecting, we're doing a source protection plan for the village of Fairhaven. So it is your plan, even though it's outside your jurisdiction. It's totally up to the village. You don't have to do an overlay district. I presume you have zoning. If you do have zoning and wish to do an overlay zone, that's great. It's totally up to you. It's
Yeah, most of
totally
the
up to you.
properties in the village are fed with public water supply, so I'm not sure what value that would put.
Right.
You know, if we have a town-wide overlay already. But we can talk about that.
Right, I mean, what benefit would that do for your water supply to have it in the village? It's not what is contributing to your water supply, so. And what I didn't get to finish was the actual physical document with what we accomplished, all the mapping, the potential contaminant source, all the steps that I outlined in the beginning of my presentation, all that information, all the documentation, but also we would have done a public education component where we would have presented the results. We would have talked about, because again, this was for the town of Sterling, it would have included all the people's wells that are not covered by one of their water districts or your village supply. So, I mean, honestly, this is still kind of an intermunicipal approach. We could call it, we could basically do two plans if the town of Sterling is still interested. But basically, I think the focus was on concerns with the village's water supply. I could be wrong.
Right.
So
Our
that's-
aquifer,
That's the impetus for tonight's meeting. And,
right.
you know, I noticed now that I got the well data that property is owned by Sterling Water LLC. They also own now a parcel that adjoins the village's parcel along 104A to the east. I understand they've been drilling wells. So although everyone keeps telling me nothing's been proposed, it sure seems like
It's gonna
maybe
be.
something's in the works. So, you know.
Well, again, Steve, this is Mayor Basile. I guess
Sure.
I'm stuck somewhere between where we left off and where we gotta go. We left off in 2016
Right,
with some information. Sterling adopted some rules. I believe Fairhaven did prior to my becoming mayor. I don't recall being involved in any of that. And so I guess I'd want to not go back too far, but far enough to pick up where you left off to see, you know, to move forward with making sure. I went to a meeting at the town board last night for the town of Sterling, and I left that meeting with the town board, received information from their attorney that we shouldn't be concerned. And that everything's good, and they got a letter from the property owner that says, we're not going to build a water plant today.
okay,
That's the short version.
okay,
But for the residents of the village of Fairhaven and future users in the town of Sterling, I guess I wanted to make sure that where we left off and the gap that you mentioned that we want to fill, that gets done, I guess, in step one. And step two, if you were to rewrite this or based on any new laws or changes in the last 5 or 6 years from when you weren't able to complete the technical services part and so forth. Would there be anything additional that we would insert? I guess that's where I'm at. And then I'll ask
There's,
for Judy.
yeah, the state has come up with, since 2016, the state of New York has come up with a framework for what they would like to see in these. So there would be a small difference in how I would update things. I would update things a little differently in the completed plan. But to answer your question, Mayor, you know, like, I can't say right now, you know, the town passed the laws because it's in their jurisdiction. I don't think the village would have to enact, you know, do anything other than, you know, review information that I've compiled that might be new. And then since we've got new people on your board and stuff, you know, just kind of refresh what we did 4.5 years ago. So I don't know. There's a new way of doing it. But to be honest with you, they kind of picked my brain on how to do it. So there isn't going to be a huge difference in how what I did 4.5 years ago to get it up to just be able for the village to put its stamp on it and say, we've got a completed source water protection plan. This will benefit the village in doing this. And, you know, I hope you go forward, you know, in doing it.
Okay, Judy, you're in?
No, I just am not clear exactly what you're going to do. Are you going to update the work that was put in place in the town of Sterling zoning code?
I guess that would be one possibility, is whether the town wants to revisit anything in their zoning code. That would be one possibility based on new information or new
Changes.
anything that might be new. But
I guess that, Steve, that's where I'm struggling, because if we do something in the village of Fairhaven, and I don't mind taking the lead or doing what we gotta do there, how does that play outside the boundaries of the village?
I'm not sure, Mary, that I understand you. What would the village be doing? This area is outside your jurisdiction. You can't pass laws to
Exactly.
protect.
So what would you, I mean, for us to engage with you, what would we do? And then we would send a letter to the town asking them to consider those changes? Because according to the town right now, they seem, and I don't mean to speak for them, and I don't mean to be too candid, but they seem pretty comfortable at their town board meeting last night that everything was good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just
I'm just trying to figure out how we can check to make sure everything's good. You know,
sure.
looking for a third party, and that would be you.
Right.
To verify. I mean, I don't want to argue with the town of Sterling. We want to work with them, but I guess we're
Right.
looking for an outside party to finish the technical assistance portion of it, and two, any changes between 2016 and 2021. And like you said, maybe very little, but very little could be the key to not unlocking Pandora's box of, this aquifer.
I've got a question. Can I be heard? You guys
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay, right at the beginning, we talked a little bit. One of my questions I submitted was about the 1987 establishment of the guidelines. And Steve mentioned that it was, the DEC's guidelines was just kind of like, well, maybe 250 gallons, yeah, but 500, pull the number out of the air. what would we have to do to get more drawdown data, to get more testing so that we would actually have a better idea of what our capacity is? Would this take like grant money to get drawdown tests done, or how, you know, if we could
Yeah, I mean,
get that done?
it's above my grants ability to do these types of tests. Yeah, you'd
Okay.
have to get, you'd have to hire a consultant. They'd have to come in and probably put monitoring or test wells in, monitor those as the village pumps their well, and do an analysis that way. So there would be a cost involved, yes.
Is there grant money available to municipalities to get that kind of thing done?
Not off the top of my head, Susan.
Okay,
I can't think of it.
okay.
Well, if I can speak, Steve, for one moment. Jay Sawyer with the town of Sterling.
Yes, Jay.
The town of Sterling is going to be putting another well in at the well field this fall. So by putting a new well into that field, wouldn't that be the opportune time to do a drawdown test?
I didn't realize the town of Sterling is putting a well in.
Yep.
Correct,
They're doing
yes.
more districts.
Oh, okay. So you're utilizing the village's supply?
Yes, it'll be to
right.
the southwest corner of their well field,
Yeah.
within the boundaries of the well field.
Sure. Yeah, that would definitely be the time to do that. And honestly, that would be required by DEC that you monitor existing wells and do all that. So whatever consultant you use to do that work, engineering or hydrogeological consultant, you would be doing that as part of that.
Yes, I agree.
Steve,
And they actually would do and here's where it would, you know, don't forget me. It would be the time to update the wellhead protection area to get a better handle on that. So if you're doing that, then, you know, that definitely would be the scenario. Maybe, Jay, you could give me a little history. I wasn't even aware that the town was doing that.
Well, town of Sterling was approved for a ready grant money for extending to Water District 2. And
Right?
part of Water District 2 is we're putting in a water tower in over on Schoolcraft Road in the
Okay.
town of Sterling and putting another well and well house in on that field, on the well field of Fair Havens.
So this is for, you have 3 water districts now or 2?
We will have, yeah, starting this fall.
You'll have 3.
Yeah,
And they're not all off of the Metro, Syracuse,
no, Water District 1 is off of Aqua.
okay,
But Water District 3 that just finished up last fall is out of Fairhaven's well field, and Water District 2 will be out of the Fairhaven well field also with a new well.
okay. Okay. So, yeah, maybe you could speak as to the issue that folks are concerned about. It seems like the mayor was at your board meeting yesterday. And it seems like it's now your water, going to be your water supply as well. So is that not a concern of now or?
Not as of now, no.
Okay. Not
But doing a drawdown test would be a perfect time to figure out maybe a better idea of what's under the ground there.
But you're not
Well-
doing it until the fall, right?
Yes.
so what I'm,
Steve,
This is Mayor Bastille. So what I'm hearing is that in the process, because I do not believe C2AE has really sized the pump or any of that yet. Because we did send some questions to them on what was going to go on down there as it gets into the beginning of the design for the pump. At least that's the information we received. That and based on what Steve said and the New York State DEC and the permitting process, all that probably is going to be put into the overall package, or is going to be done as a prerequisite to the design, or is going to be part of the design. Something, testing the existing pumps, not only the recharge, but whatever Steve was talking about for these different tests that would be done to make sure that the system recharges and can handle a certain flow or volume.
This well that they're putting in, is this explicitly for the town of Sterling? Not that you're just going to use it for the town of Sterling, but it's to augment the village's supply, right? So it's all just increase the capacity.
Our understanding, Steve, is this well will feed the town of Sterling, and there'll be some crossover piping. So if either system needs, had a breakdown, they'll have one well feeding the town of Sterling. The backup will be one of the village wells, and the same for us. We do have the two wells, but if need be, we could share with Sterling the backup of that well. And basically,
So Sterling's not going to buy water from Fairhaven. Okay, interesting.
I'll mute everybody. Please mute people. So they are buying water from the village of Fairhaven, but all the funding and stuff requires them to have some ownership into that well. So please mute everybody who we're talking. So that's kind of if Scott or Jay's there. Did I say that right?
Yes, that's correct, dear Jim. The new water tower, heaven forbid you guys have a problem with any of your towers. When the system is developed completely, they would also be able to back up your water towers out of that Schoolcraft Road water system. And yes, it will be connected to Fairhaven. If need be, it'll be as simple as turning a valve over to exchange water from the different pumps, you might say, at the well field.
Okay, that's what I thought.
What we refer to as an interconnection. So,
yeah, correct.
But on a day-to-day basis, there'll be that valve will be turned off, and that well will be feeding. Is it District 3?
District 3, and the new one is 2.
And
So both of them.
The new one is 2. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I know it's a little backwards, but that's the way it ended up laying out.
And
Gotcha.
that water will be metered going out, so we know, we'll be able to meter from all the wells.
Okay. Well, that's going to make for a very interesting permitting process through DEC. And I want to jump the gun on that one, but because you've got 2 existing permitted wells, you've got a third, you got another party that's going to have another well adjacent. They're going to want to know, for example, when they put the second well in, they had to pump both wells 1 and 2 simultaneously. It'll be interesting to see how they will treat it. I know you're saying it will be the town of Sterling's well, but it is the same aquifer. And so they'll treat it. It'll be interesting. Make a long story short, if nothing else, they will monitor the impact of this new well on the existing 2 wells and what the impact vice versa would be of pumping of wells 1 and 2 on well 3, we'll call it. So yes, there will be monitoring, and that will hopefully provide all very useful information to identify better the protection area. And it still won't tell you if something across the road or, next door would impact your now the village's well or the town well. That would only have to be done on a site-by-site basis. So, just so you know.
So, I'm not sure who's on from the town besides you, Jay. So should Steve be, maybe put in contact with C2AE to make sure that they have all the right components in place for the engineering portion of this? And then the follow-up testing once the well is in? It seems like, it seems a little bit late once the well's in, but there should maybe be some discussions that Steve could be helpful with.
Sure. Yeah, it's Ian's in charge of that project.
Right. And who is in charge of the project from Sterling? Is it just the board in general, or is that something we would refer to Scott on?
No, that would actually be me.
Okay. So do you want to help close that loop with Ian and Steve to make sure we got all our bases covered?
Sure.
Thank you.
Jay, this is Roger. Wouldn't the DEC have to be already involved for you people to get the grant?
Well, there's a permitting process for the DEC that's underway as far as I know right now.
Yeah, I believe Ian's already been working on that with the DEC. I'm sure they do that before they did the proposed well.
What was the grant source for this?
There was several. Part of the water tower was paid by already.
Yeah,
Okay,
the rest was U.S. Rural Water Development.
but you guys haven't drilled the well yet or test wells or anything, right?
No.
All right.
So I wonder from this point forward, Scott, and I'll call you offline to talk about who should be invited to meetings and stuff like that. Just so the village can be abreast of what's going on. And support your project.
Yeah, we'll definitely work with you. And I didn't want you to leave thinking that, we thought we were all set. I just, our attorney had looked over the land use regulations we've done in 2016 that Steve had done for us. And he was very impressed with how it was wrote and said that we were, pretty well protected with what was there with what the zoning commission worked on before. So, I definitely want to fine tune it and, if anything can be updated and, we'll definitely work with you guys on your part.
Thank you, Scott. And that's what it sounded like listening to Steve, that there wouldn't be a whole lot between 2016 and now, since he was involved in writing the DEC stuff. So, we just want to stay on top of that. And I'm all.
I would definitely want to, Mayor, I don't want to wait, but if you're going to get this, I love numbers. So if you're going to get numbers, that's the time to tweak things, update it, quite honestly. So I had no idea this was going on. So if I sounded like I was completely ignorant, I'm sorry, but I had no idea about the town well and all that. So like I said, I've been removed from some Sterling and Fairhaven for a while. So
no, I just think we probably would pull you back into the loop as kind of a third party advisory with what's going on with the design, and that might help lead into this wellhead protection.
Yeah, I agree. Is this the firm that used to be Gominiac is now C2 whatever it's called?
C2AE.
What's it called?
C2AE.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're actually, they're based out of two places. One of them up towards Upper State Plattsburgh, I think that area in New York. And they have a Midwest location,
Oh, okay.
Michigan or Illinois. They get two main offices.
Okay.
And water and wastewater is supposed to be something that they're fairly strong in, so.
Okay, we got a couple people raising their hand to be unmuted, so.
Okay, we can do that. I went, so, Jay or Scott, you guys have any more questions?
My only question, Steve, would be, if the outfit that bought the property across the road, they would have to, if they did anything with that well, they'd have to test with the DEC. Would the DEC monitor what happens on the village well site as well when they did that? Or, I mean, do they go as far as,
It's a good
how
question.
far would they go with that?
If they have the ability to capacity, in other words, the pumps they put in their well, if they have the capacity to withdraw 100,000 gallons per day, and that translates to about 69 gallons per minute. If they have that capacity, they will have to go through DEC and get a water withdrawal permit. If they only take 30 gallons per minute out, on average, they wouldn't have to, which is one of the reasons why we did write it in the town's regulations. We didn't put any numbers on it. We just called it a water extraction facility. So if they did have to, and if it's a commercial outfit, I don't know if that would be enough water. If they have 100,000 gallons per day or more, the capacity to withdraw it, again, it's just a pump capacity. If they have that capacity and they have to go through DEC, they'll go through the same permitting process that the town of Sterling or the village of Fairhaven will go through. They'll have to get a water withdrawal permit. They'll have to do a 72-hour pump test. They'll have to monitor all wells that are around it. And I can tell you this, because I know of one outfit, it was for a fish hatchery, and the town was adjoining it. They made them drill a well. They made them put a data transducer in one of the town's wells and monitor that well. And I worked in my capacity with rural water for that town, commented. So yes, they would have to monitor the village and soon to be town wells well. And I mean, but it would be, you'd have to stay on top of them. I wouldn't guarantee it. There's been a lot of turnover in that department. There's no longer a hydrogeologist in that department. I'm not going to put down engineers, but they're not hydrogeologists. But yes, they should be monitoring it. That's why we made sure we put it in the town's law. So as a backup, but yes, they should be monitoring across the road or next door.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, Scott.
So first, thank you, Steve. We are going to open it up to the public now. So I appreciate everybody hanging on and give us an opportunity to talk with Steve direct so we can get our questions answered. As soon as Terry gets back in the room, those people that have their hand raised, she'll start going down the list.
Okay, Mayor, one last thing from me, and then, so I guess I'm kind of, and that's fine, in a holding pattern. I'll get a hold of the towns, speak to their people, but it doesn't make sense for me to really update until we get hard data. So if that's okay.
But I think that whenever we're having a meeting or whenever we're, talking about the water system, at least keep you abreast of that.
Yes.
You can decide based on the agenda whether it's something you should be listening in on, or if you want to float some questions out so that they can be answered in that meeting. And then once you get the answers, you can decide if, you need to dig in a little bit deeper with Ian Yurden or with
Good.
Jim Sawyer in the town or with the village.
Great. Thank you very much.
So I don't know who's first, second, or third, but I want to thank the public for being patient. Go ahead.
Well,
Karen,
could I jump in?
Yep, we're done. Go ahead. How are you?
Steve, I'm with Sterling Water Stewards, and
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify. What I think I got from what you were saying is that you did not have an opportunity to really write a final report.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
That's correct.
And so I also thought I heard you say that there would be no charge for the service of,
No charge.
yeah, so I'm curious as to what could possibly be the downside of getting the documentation. Because as you pointed out, there seems to be so little that is really known about the characteristics and the capacity of our aquifer. And so since you did study it, we really would like to see the documentation of the work that you already did. So that's what I'm understanding that you're offering to provide. And I just would like to say that it seems to me that there's no downside to having you do that work for us at no charge, to just
Right.
finish and document, because we're in the business of Sterling Water Stewards trying to understand what is known about the capacity of the aquifer, its characteristics, what the true area around it that needs to be protected in order to protect it from groundwater contamination. And so there's very little documentation. As he said, the 1990 report talked about it a little, but to get on paper what he just told us and to document the study that he did would be very valuable. You have to understand that when the existing regulation, the special use permit thing would be kicked off, that will require whoever wants the special use permit to hire an engineering firm and give us a lot of data. And how are we going to analyze that data if we have no data ourselves? We're going to take their word for it. So we really need to know what is known about this, and we need to have it on paper. Is that fair enough, Steve?
It is. I've already given your consultants information that I've collected. And what I'm wrestling with, Karen, is how do I put this? The plan I did in 2016 was for the town, was a town of Sterling plan that primarily focused on the rationale for doing it was for the village of Fairhaven. So there really isn't two plans here. There's one plan.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out what the best way to approach this is, so that there is a finished plan. I get credit for it, and the information is out there for you, for everyone's use. So
Well,
I'm
the
just,
village of Fairhaven is in the town of Sterling.
oh, I understand.
And
Oh, I understand.
yeah,
So, and residents of Fairhaven are residents of Sterling. So, yep.
and
So,
our water, the village residents expect clean, safe, and abundant water.
Yep.
And so you can't just say it's a town of Sterling issue. It's your water system. It's all the same ball of wax.
I'm just wrestling with how to literally package it up, frame it, So the town of Sterling, it really doesn't make sense, like you said, to do two plans, because it's the town of Sterling, villages in the town of Sterling.
So Steve, I'm just getting Mayor Basile here. Yeah.
Yes.
I agree, we don't need two plans, we need a plan, and we're trying to link you up with C2AE, so, you know, to finish your plan, you must need data and information. Read as a technical assistance type situation. So in order to finish your plan, although there's no cost for you, there's probably gonna be some data that's gonna have to be provided. That
Right, the only data that I have not provided, or that if there's gonna be a plan in the villages, whether it's the town of Sterling, you know, whether there's one plan or two plans, one that covers the whole town of Sterling, one that just covers the area around the village of Sterling's wells. I have no problems with releasing, but there's some information that was confidential that I can't release. And that was the well survey information. I can't release that information because it wasn't mine to release. That would have to be a town of Sterling determination. But I have no problems with sharing information. I just have to figure out what the best way to package this up as one plan, repackage the town of Sterling plan, and then, you know, because quite honestly, I wanted to make sure that we had good data on the village's supply before I identified an area around that area. So
how do you get that data?
You're going to provide it when your new well goes in, town's new well goes in. And that's the only, because otherwise, wouldn't you as a public water supplier, you don't have to provide that. You did that in 1968 or 7 and 1986. So it's only when you put a new well in that you have to provide that information. So
to go back to your plan from 2016, you said you did get to finish it. If we weren't putting this well in, how would you have finished it? What would be the process of finishing?
I apologize, let me turn this off here. I'm not sure we would do it because of our experience with working in the town of Sterling. Because it's a village of Fairhaven, we would do it. So I have to talk with my boss because it left such an awful taste in our mouth and legally left us in such jeopardy. We could have lost our grant, our nationwide grant. It wouldn't have just affected me, but all my colleagues in other states, that I have to discuss what the ramifications of doing that are. But I don't think I have a problem releasing that information. I don't think I do. So.
Well, not worried so much about releasing the information, but just how we proceed forward. And because the new well's going in, that ought to give us an opportunity to do what you need to do. There's somebody else that would like to speak.
Yes, Susan. You're muted, Susan. Can you unmute yourself?
I can't unmute her. I'm trying. I'm asking her to unmute.
Can she unmute herself?
Susan, if you can hear us, unmute yourself.
You have to unmute yourself. I can't do it. Oh, maybe she doesn't have a microphone.
We heard it
We
before.
heard it
Did we?
before.
Oh, okay.
Susan, we cannot hear you.
I know, yeah.
I know.
Oh, no.
Well, Steve, didn't you say before that you would need to do pumping tests for 3 days in order to get at the true capacity or something?
Yeah, it's the
That's right.
pumping test protocols
Oh,
is
there
a
it is.
72-hour pump test.
Okay.
The question is whether they would treat, like, for example, they would definitely have to pump the new Sterling well for 72 hours, monitor the other two wells. Obviously, the village would need to pump one of their wells so they'd have water. So one well would be going, it's very complicated is what I'm saying. And the town's engineers and consultants will have to sort that out with DEC because it's 3 wells.
This
It's
will give
coming.
us an idea of the true capacity.
Yes, it will.
Well, that's fortuitous then that we're getting that third
It
well
is.
right now.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, before the
Something
bottling
unexpected.
plant goes in. Yeah, I've got a question, kind of along that same line. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, if the bottling plant, which it sounds like is going to happen, comes in and is required to do a drawdown, assuming they're going to take that much, extract that much volume, what will, okay, suppose their data indicates something that looks a little shaky. What then? What does the town do? Your plan, does it protect us if it indicates there's not an adequate supply, or what is an action point here? How do we determine that? I don't quite
And
get
that
it.
was one of your questions, Sue. It's gonna generate a lot of information. They're gonna have a consultant. They're gonna have a report. That's gonna go before the town of Sterling's planning board, who will give a yes or no on a special use permit.
Okay.
Since now the town has literally a stake in this, a well stake in this, I would hope that they would hire their own consultant or certainly come to me. I'm a professional geologist, PG, and I would review all the information and give my opinion. So, but the
Okay.
town is making a decision, just like they do on any special use permit, a yes or a no, based on does it meet our standards?
All
And
right, so
the standard would be an adverse impact. So if the aquifer is as sensitive that if they pump on it, it's going to affect the town, the village, 2 village wells, or the new town well, then maybe that is grounds for adverse impact.
all right.
The only thing I would say, and Scott, you're with the town, right? Jay, you're still there. There may be some tweaking of the town law that we passed 4.5 years ago to possibly tighten that up, although your town attorney seems okay with it. For example, for a town in Tompkins County near Ithaca, we define very explicitly what a significant adverse impact is.
Yes.
And we were very explicit. We said it was this, it was that,
Right.
to get rid of any wiggle room. Or there's no way we can get rid of any wiggle room, but tighten it up even firmer.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad to say the town attorney thought it was pretty good, but nothing's perfect. So particularly if the town has now got, or at the time it was always, back then it was just the village's water, even though the village residents were in the town, everyone on the town board and were outside the village. There wasn't a stake in the game. Now the town will have a stake in the game. So I would just take another look. If your town attorney feels good about it, that's okay. There's been some new legal cases, and if he's comfortable with it, I'm not a lawyer, but that's why we tried to tighten things up in it was the town of Danby outside of Ithaca. The other thing that we could have done is outright prohibited extraction wells, extraction activities, and the town was not comfortable doing that. So, because of that. So we tried to put as many, standards on it and safeguards as we could. So if the safeguards, town's comfortable with the safeguards, and the village is comfortable with safeguards, who am I to say? I've reviewed them. I still think they're pretty good. I mean, they're very comparable to the DEC's own regulations. So, so they would have to do, even if they didn't meet that threshold of having to go through DEC, if they say intentionally went just below it, they'd have to go through something very, very, very similar to what the state does. And I think it was you, Susan, that said that the state rarely doesn't give these permits. The town would probably be more likely not to give a permit than the state. Let's just put it, let's put it that way. But I have seen the state not give a permit, particularly if a public water supplier is involved.
Well, that's what
Public water suppliers involved, they're much, much more sensitive about that.
They better be. They should be. Yeah, I wouldn't care if this guy was doing an aquifer on the other side of Sterling, but since we're all drinking that water, it really seems like a higher level of protection is in order for that. Because it is over 1,000, probably over 1,000 people are depending on that water, and a lot of businesses and a state park. And it really seems like we should be really rigorous. I mean, when I looked at the town of Rose and the town of Cazenovia plans that you had done, they had very specific action points, like, kind of like a town of Maine where they had a monitoring well. And if the water level went down 1 inch, then the bottling plant stopped pumping. So they had real numbers and quantified safeguards, which you mentioned for the town of Tompkins County. And I think that's really important. Instead of just, there will be no adverse effects.
Just keep in mind, Sue, no law is the same, no town is the same.
Right.
So one size does not fit all.
Gotcha.
So what works in Cazenovia or Danby, in all likelihood, would not work in Sterling.
I know, but I know we're
I
not worried about
understand that.
we're
It's
not
the
worried
same-
about a manure lagoon like they
No,
got in Rose.
So that's what we were in Rose, right?
But
So
what you're saying is here we got a bottling plant that we're concerned with. So
and they're very
absolutely.
concerned
Different
about that in other
concerns.
towns. You're not alone.
And it's interesting that you make the point that development does seem to be increasing, and in these rural low density development, more and more of that kind of residential and or commercial happening. I guess I don't know what the story on that dollar store out there is, if that's really going to go through or not, but it would be within the aquifer area if it does go in. More impermeable surfaces.
So, again, I've been out of the loop for.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's really true or not, whether Scott knows, or if we're gonna have a dollar store out there with a parking lot or not.
I haven't heard there's been no application or anything for one.
Okay, so maybe it's not gonna
Oh, I
happen.
know that the gentleman that owns the old bait farm said he was approached by Dollar General, and he did turn them down for that specific reason. So it didn't contaminate the aquifer.
Well, that's good. That is good, but relying on goodwill is better than nothing. Guess that's what we got, what we have.
Now, to put a number, I know that's been a big concern of Sterling Water Stewards, put a number on like what the aquifer capacity is. That's really, basically what you need to know is how many straws do you have in this aquifer and how much recharge do you have going into the aquifer. It's what we call a mass balance. What goes in what goes out should not exceed what goes in. If it does, then you will have what we call groundwater mining. The water table will gradually go down. That has occurred in some places in New York. You don't want that to occur in your honestly thin, shallow little aquifer. So any straws that go into that area are a concern, but unfortunately, coming up with that safe yield requires doing a lot of work, pumping tests, and possibly a computer model. Now, they're not going to do a computer model when they put the new well in, but they are going to do pumping tests. So that is going to be an opportunity, fortuitous as it is, to get at the capacity of the well field. And they don't do it the same way they did it back in the mid 80s or the 60s. It's much more quantitative, and they're going to have to show, no offense to Sterling, that there's going to be enough water to supply both Sterling and Fairhaven. Now, on the surface, it certainly looks like there would be, based on the numbers that are out there for withdrawal rates in the permits, but you will see that they will rewrite those permits once they've done a pumping test. So just to let everybody know that.
That's very helpful.
So this is Mayor Vasile.
Yep.
Unless anybody else has any questions, Steve, I want to thank you for making time for us this evening.
You bet.
Scott and Jay, I'll catch up with you guys later on in the week so we can kind of close the loop on what we talked about. And other than that, if everybody's okay, any last questions before we close the meeting?
If somebody could, maybe either from the village or from the town, maybe email me just kind of a little description of the project, maybe the service areas. I mean, I'm sure you got something.
Oh, absolutely. That would be.
I would love to read about it and know what's going on.
It will include some information on the town of Wolcott that we have a contract with to supply water to.
Oh, okay.
They're expanding their water district, and the numbers that they're giving us are within the contract limits. It's something we signed with them a few years ago, and they've been using some, but they haven't exercised the full daily amount. And this new extended district, they're telling us will not either, based on the number of households and doing the calculations. You're a numbers guy, you'd like that. So we'll make sure that there's you have a full package.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for caring about water.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Appreciate your time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks, everybody.
Scott, thanks, Jay. Once they're